What if I told you that a doctor who looked inside more human colons than perhaps anyone in history discovered something that challenges everything we think we know about aging? And it all came down to 5 foods he refused to touch? I am not talking about theory. I am not talking about studies on mice. I am talking about a man who performed over 370,000 colonoscopies across 5 decades, who pioneered a surgical technique that changed medicine forever, and who, until his passing in 2021 at the age of 86, had never been hospitalized for illness in his entire life. His name was Dr. Hiromi Shinya, and what he saw inside the human gut led him to conclusions that most doctors still will not accept. This is his story, and the 5 foods he said are stealing your youth from the inside out. Beth Israel Medical Center, New York City. A young Japanese surgeon was about to attempt something every senior physician in the room believed was impossible, removing a polyp from inside the colon without cutting the patient open. The standard procedure required full abdominal surgery, weeks of recovery, significant risk. But Hiromi Shinya had studied the problem differently. He asked a question no one else was asking. What if we could see inside and operate inside without trauma to the outer body? That day, he performed the world's first colonoscopic polypectomy. The polyp was removed, the patient went home the same day, and medicine changed forever. But what Shinya saw in that moment, and in the hundreds of thousands of procedures that followed, would lead him not to a pharmaceutical solution, not to a surgical empire, but to 5 specific foods and the radical idea that the gut reveals everything about how we age. Fast forward 20 years. Shinya was practicing between New York and Japan, seeing patients across 2 continents and 2 vastly different food cultures, and he started noticing patterns. Patients who ate certain ways had colons that looked young, pink, smooth, resilient. Patients who ate other ways had colons that looked inflamed, polyp-ridden, decades older than their chronological age. He documented this obsessively, and one thing became undeniable. The inside of your body tells the truth your outside can hide. You can look healthy, you can feel fine, but the gut does not lie. And what Shinya saw over and over was that 5 foods kept appearing in the patients with the worst gut health, the most disease, the fastest aging. 5 foods that most people eat every single day without a second thought. Let's start with the first one, dairy. And I know what you are thinking, calcium, strong bones, doctor recommended. Shinya's response after examining tens of thousands of colons: the worst colons I have ever seen belong to people who consume the most dairy. He was unequivocal. In the enzyme factor, he wrote that in decades of clinical observation, he had never seen a heavy milk drinker with a healthy gut. Not once. His theory centered on enzymes. Shinya believed the human body has a finite enzyme reserve, a kind of biological battery that depletes over time. Enzymes are required for every biochemical process: digestion, immune response, cellular repair, detoxification. When you eat foods that demand excessive enzymes to process, you drain that reserve. And dairy, he argued, is one of the most enzyme-depleting substances you can ingest, particularly pasteurized, homogenized milk. The calcium paradox, he pointed out, is this: countries with the highest dairy consumption also have the highest rates of osteoporosis. Japan, traditionally low in dairy intake, has historically had far lower hip fracture rates than the United States. His conclusion: dairy does not build strong bones, it leaches them. The animal protein in milk creates an acidic environment, which the body neutralizes by pulling calcium from the bones. You are drinking milk for calcium and losing calcium in the process. Beyond bone health, what Shinya saw endoscopically was clear. Dairy consumers had more inflammation, more polyps, more abnormal tissue. There is a cultural dimension to this that Shinya found impossible to ignore. He treated patients in both countries for decades. The difference was not subtle. Japanese patients who followed a traditional diet had intestinal walls that looked decades younger than their American counterparts eating a Western diet. And the single most consistent variable separating the 2 groups was not calorie intake, not exercise kinematics. It was dairy and animal protein. He was not working from hypothesis. He was working from tissue. Second food, red meat. Here, Shinya was equally direct. He did not eat it. He did not recommend it. And in his clinical experience, people who ate red meat regularly aged faster. Red meat is difficult to digest. It requires enormous enzymatic output. It moves slowly through the intestines. And in that slow transit, it begins to putrefy, releasing toxins that inflame the gut lining and burden the liver. Shinya pointed to his own observations. Patients who ate red meat 4 or more times per week consistently showed poor intestinal environments, thickened and darkened colon walls, higher polyp formation, and more frequent cancer recurrence. In contrast, patients who eliminated red meat and followed his plant-based protocols showed remarkable gut regeneration, often within months. He described seeing colons transform from inflamed and lesioned to smooth and vibrant simply by removing animal flesh from the diet. The key is transit time. Plant foods move through the system in 18 to 24 hours. Meat can sit in the gut for 48 to 72 hours, fermenting, rotting, producing ammonia, and other carcinogenic compounds. Shinya's rule, if it had a face, minimize it or eliminate it. What struck him most was not the patients who were sick. It was the patients who felt fine. Men in their 50s and 60s who ate red meat regularly, exercised moderately, had no alarming symptoms. And yet when he looked inside, the colon told a different story entirely. Thickened walls, darkened tissue, the biological age of someone 20 years older. The outside was holding together. The inside was not. That gap between how we feel and what is actually happening in our tissue is what Shinya spent his career trying to close. Third food, refined sugar. Sugar, he argued, is an enzyme assassin. It depletes your enzyme reserves faster than almost any other substance because it triggers massive insulin responses, inflammatory cascades, and oxidative stress. But beyond metabolic damage, Shinya saw something else in his patients. Sugar consumers had visibly poor gut health, more yeast overgrowth, more fermentation, more bloating, more erratic bowel patterns. He described the gut of a high sugar eater as a fermentation factory where undigested sugars feed pathogenic bacteria and yeast, creating a toxic internal environment. The result, chronic low-grade inflammation, which Shinya called the root of all degenerative disease. His protocol was strict. No refined sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial sweeteners. He allowed small amounts of natural fruit, but emphasized moderation. The goal is to keep the gut environment clean, alkaline, and hospitable only to beneficial bacteria. Fourth food, alcohol. Shinya did not drink. He never had. And he was adamant that alcohol is one of the most destructive substances to the gut and liver, the twin engines of longevity. Alcohol is a direct cellular toxin. It kills cells on contact. It inflames the gut lining. It depletes enzymes. It burdens the liver, which must detoxify it at great metabolic cost. And it disrupts the gut microbiome, killing beneficial bacteria and allowing pathogenic strains to flourish. Shinya observed that even moderate drinkers, those who have 1 or 2 glasses of wine per day, show measurable gut damage over time. Redness, irritation, micro tears in the intestinal lining. He was unequivocal, there is no safe amount of alcohol. The idea that red wine is healthy because of resveratrol, he called it wishful thinking. You can get resveratrol from grapes. You do not need the ethanol. And the damage from the ethanol, he argued, far outweighs any antioxidant benefit. For Shinya, the choice was simple. If you want to age slowly, if you want a gut that functions optimally into your 80s and 90s, you eliminate alcohol completely. Fifth food, processed flour products, white bread, pasta, pastries, crackers. Shinya grouped all refined grain products into one category: enzyme depleted, nutrient void, gut damaging. The refining process strips away the bran and germ, which contain the fiber, vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. What is left is pure starch, which behaves in the body almost like sugar. It spikes blood glucose. It feeds pathogenic bacteria. It constipates. It clogs. Shinya saw this clinically. Patients who ate white flour products regularly had sluggish, compacted colons, often with diverticula, polyps, and poor motility. He described refined flour as glue in the intestines, literally sticking to the walls and preventing nutrient absorption and waste elimination. His alternative, whole grains, minimally processed, brown rice, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, Foods that still contain their enzyme content, their fiber, their life force. So those are the five: dairy, red meat, refined sugar, alcohol, processed flour, five foods that Hiromi Shinya, after 370,000 colonoscopies and 50 years of clinical practice, refused to eat. Until his death in 2021, he had never been hospitalized for illness. He had never had a major chronic disease. He worked, traveled, and saw patients well into his 80s, and he credited it all to what he did not eat. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Shinya did not just tell his patients what to avoid. He told them what to eat, and the results, according to him, were extraordinary. He claimed that not a single patient who followed his protocol after cancer treatment ever had a recurrence, not one. That is a bold claim, one mainstream oncology would challenge. But Shinya stood by it. So what did he eat? He practiced intermittent fasting, though he did not call it that. He simply did not eat late at night. His rule was no food at least 4 to 5 hours before bed, because digestion requires energy. If you eat late and then sleep, your body has to choose: digest food or repair cells. It cannot do both optimally. Sleep is when your body heals, regenerates, produces growth hormone. If your digestive system is working overtime, those processes are impaired. Shinya said, "This is one of the biggest mistakes people make. Eating dinner at 8 p.m. and going to bed at 10 p.m. Your body never gets a chance to truly rest." This was Shinya's daily template, and he followed it for over 40 years. No deviation, no cheat days, no exceptions, and the result, he said, was a body that functioned in his 80s like that of someone decades younger. But here is the deeper question. Why does this work? What is the mechanism? Shinya's answer was his enzyme theory. He believed every human is born with a finite supply of enzymes, what he called mother enzymes. These are produced by the pancreas and other organs, and they are the raw material for all the specific enzymes your body needs. Digestive enzymes, metabolic enzymes, immune enzymes. When you eat foods that are enzyme depleted or enzyme demanding, you force your body to produce massive amounts of enzymes to break them down. Over time, this depletes your reserve, and when your enzyme reserve is depleted, you age, you get sick, you lose vitality. The solution: eat enzyme-rich foods. Minimize enzyme-depleting foods. Preserve your reserve. Mainstream science does not fully embrace this theory. Most biochemists would say enzymes are produced on demand, and the body does not have a finite reserve in the way Shinya described. But here is what is undeniable. Shinya's clinical observations, his endoscopic evidence, his patient outcomes. He saw the inside of more human guts than almost anyone in medical history. And what he saw consistently was that people who ate the way he recommended had healthier guts. And people with healthier guts lived longer, healthier lives. The theory may be debated. The tissue does not lie. So let's bring this full circle. What can we learn from Hiromi Shinya? First, what you avoid matters as much as what you eat. Shinya's 5 forbidden foods, dairy, red meat, refined sugar, alcohol, processed flour, were not arbitrary. They were based on decades of direct observation of human tissue. If you want to slow aging, eliminating or drastically reducing these foods is the foundation. Second, whole plant foods are the core. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, fermented foods, seaweed. Third, how you eat matters. Chew thoroughly. Eat in a calm state. Do not drink with meals. Do not eat late at night. Fourth, hydration is strategic. Water first thing in the morning. Water between meals, not during meals. Fifth, food is information. Every bite either depletes your enzyme reserves and accelerates aging or preserves your reserves and supports longevity. Hiromi Shinya passed away in 2021 at the age of 86. He spent over 50 years looking inside the human body. He saw what works and what does not in theory, in practice, in real tissue, in real outcomes. And his message was simple. You control how you age. The gut reveals everything, and 5 foods are stealing your youth from the inside out. Remove them. Replace them with whole plant foods. Follow the principles, and your body will reward you with decades of vitality. This is not a diet. This is a system, and it was tested on hundreds of thousands of patients. The evidence is not in a lab. It is in the living tissue of people who follow this path. And if you want to join them, the choice is yours. Starting today, there is one more thing Shinya said that most people overlook. He did not frame this as a sacrifice. He did not describe a life of restriction or denial. He described a life of clarity. When you stop feeding your body substances that force it to fight constantly, the energy that was going toward damage control becomes available for everything else. For thinking, for moving, for healing. He performed surgery in his 80s. He traveled between continents in his late 80s. Not because he was exceptional, because he had not spent 5 decades slowly poisoning a system that was designed to last. That, he said, is the real secret. Not what you add, what you stop taking away. If this story has changed the way you look at the health of your own body, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the medical history and biological truths that have been overlooked for too long. Protect your vitality. The next chapter of human longevity will be shared here soon.